Behind the grand, velvet curtain of the entertainment world, a terrifying paradox thrives. We are socialized to worship the icon, to look at a multi-platinum powerhouse or a box office giant and see a god wrapped in dazzling stage lights. But Hollywood is a machinery built on the golden illusion, a system engineered to project a picture-perfect family aura or a clean-cut aesthetic while masking an absolute underworld of dark choices. When the facade is violently ripped away, the sudden drop strips away the glamour, forcing us to look directly into a horrifying double life where your favorite role models become the architects of raw agony. These are not mere mistakes. They are armed robberies, brutal domestic abuses, and cold-blooded executions that left an unfillable void in the cultural landscape. In this countdown, as an expert storyteller, I will use the systemic blade of truth to expose 17 famous black figures who crossed the ultimate line into a monstrous reality. Trust me, once you bear witness to the chilling evidence hidden behind the forgiving spotlight, you will never look at these legends the same way again. Phil Spector. Moda the Forensic. Look closely at the deep, unnatural shadows cast across the marble foyer of a faux Pyrenees castle mansion in Alhambra, California, on the chilly dawn of February 3, 2003. Specifically, a single spent .38 caliber casing resting mere inches from a blood-spattered velvet chair. That tiny piece of brass became the definitive forensic anchor that shattered the golden illusion of a legendary music producer, a multi-million-dollar icon who had spent decades wrapped in the dazzling stage lights of global acclaim. To the world, Spector was an untouchable creative powerhouse. To 40-year-old actress Lana Clarkson, who had mistakenly accepted an invitation to his estate after meeting him at her hostess job, he became a silent predator. After she rejected his erratic, alcohol-fueled advances, the romantic veneer dissolved into raw agony when Spector shoved a loaded firearm into her mouth and pulled the trigger, leaving her lifeless body slumped in the entryway. His driver testified to hearing the fatal blast before Spector walked out of the house, weapon in hand, casually uttering the chilling phrase, "I think I just shot someone," though his high-priced legal team tried to weaponize the systemic blade of celebrity exceptionalism, cruelly claiming Clarkson took her own life out of despair over a failing career. A second trial in 2009 ripped away his forgiving spotlight, exposing testimonies from 5 other women who had previously been held at gunpoint by the producer. This unmasked a decades-long double life of latent violence, cementing a 19-year-old to life prison sentence that left his musical legacy buried under an unfillable void of absolute disgrace before he ultimately died behind bars in 2021. The majestic, echoing wall of sound that defined generations of classic pop music is suddenly silenced by the deafening, isolated crack of a single gunshot inside a dark mansion foyer. O.J. Simpson. Mode B, the reverse tragedy. A 33-year prison sentence, a humiliating mugshot in a Las Vegas detention facility, and a forced auction stripping away every piece of sports memorabilia he ever owned saw a fallen football giant standing in the absolute abyss of his own hubris. Yet, if you rewind the tape of destiny to June 1994, you are thrust back into a world where an NFL superstar and movie powerhouse lived at the absolute zenith of the golden illusion, a beloved American icon basking in a forgiving spotlight. But that picture-perfect aura was merely a shield for a toxic, obsessive romance that culminated on the dark, quiet stone walkway of a Brentwood condo. Driven by a volatile jealousy, the former sports hero completely shattered his public facade, unleashing a merciless knife attack that subjected his ex-wife, Nicole Brown, and her friend, Ronald Goldman, to a horrific, bloody slaughter. The sudden drop from a national treasure to a cold-blooded suspect was watched by 95 million viewers during a surreal, slow-motion police chase down the Los Angeles freeway. While the systemic blade of a brilliant defense team manipulated deep racial prejudices to secure an unbelievable acquittal in the 1995 criminal trial, the unfillable void of his dark nature could not find true redemption. Stripped of $33.5 million in a subsequent civil suit, his unmasked double life spiraled until September 13, 2007, when he led an armed group into a Vegas hotel room to steal back his own legacy at gunpoint. This final, reckless scheme cemented his ultimate downfall, ensuring that until his death from cancer in 2024, he remained a monument of shattered glamour. The synchronized flashes of 1,000 adoring paparazzi cameras instantly cut to black, replaced by the heavy, systematic locking of a maximum security cell door that strips away an athlete's final illusion of nobility. Chuck Berry. Mode C, the immersive witness. I remember standing under the roaring heat of the dazzling stage lights, watching an immortal rock and roll pioneer execute his signature duck walk, while his guitar riffs sent thousands of fans into a collective frenzy. He was a musical powerhouse, the very architect of youth culture, basking in a forgiving spotlight that made him seem completely untouchable. But if you stepped into the shadow of a dim Mexican bar in late 1959, the beautiful illusion of an American icon evaporated into a chilling reality. I can still envision the exact moment his double life took a sinister turn when Berry, then 33, targeted Janice Escalante, a naive 14-year-old girl, falsely promising her legitimate employment at his St. Louis nightclub. He ruthlessly transported the minor across state lines for immoral purposes, treating her young life as disposable cargo until federal authorities intervened under the Mann Act. The sudden drop was devastating. His 20-month prison sentence in 1962 became a merciless foe that permanently fractured his picture-perfect cultural status. Yet, the true depth of his unfillable void wasn't fully exposed until the late 1980s behind the locked doors of his Southern Air restaurant in Missouri. Federal investigators uncovered an absolute nightmare. Berry had installed hidden cameras inside the women's restrooms, secretly recording dozens of unsuspecting patrons using the facilities. This calculated betrayal subjected 59 female plaintiffs to a modern, digitized raw agony, culminating in a massive $1.2 million class action settlement in 1990 that permanently unmasked a rock legend as a calculated voyeur before his death in 2017. The electrifying, legendary opening chord of Johnny B. Good suddenly warps and distorts, replaced by the mechanical, rhythmic click of a hidden camera shutter capturing the absolute ruin of an idol's legacy. Ike Turner. Mode D, the systemic critique. Examine the violent machinery of the mid-20th century music industry, and you will see how the forgiving spotlight of creative genius was systematically weaponized to protect a monstrous domestic dictator. Ike Turner was celebrated as a brilliant architect of R&B and rock and roll, a visionary powerhouse wrapped in the golden illusion of a legendary musical partnership. But that glamorous marriage to Tina Turner was a calculated survival strategy designed to mask a terrifying, decades-long double life rooted in unbridled cruelty. The systemic blade of an industry that prioritized profits over human life allowed Ike to transform their private residence into an absolute house of horror. Behind closed doors, he subjected his wife to a relentless barrage of raw agony, using wooden coat hangers, heavy shoes, and sharp objects as weapons to punish any perceived trace of independence. This sophisticated pattern of psychological manipulation left Tina trapped under an invisible wall of terror, her autonomy completely shattered while the public cheered for their hit records. The sudden drop occurred in July 1976 when a bloodied, bruised Tina finally managed to escape a Dallas hotel room with nothing but a few cents in her pocket, exposing his monstrous nature to the world in her explosive autobiography. Though a subsequent 1989 felony drug arrest and an 18-month prison sentence in 1990 further solidified his public disgrace, the industry's historical protection of his abuse left an unfillable void where accountability belonged, ensuring that until his death in 2007, his legacy remained permanently tied to the horrific scars of his victims. The soulful, energetic rhythm of a classic R&B bassline is abruptly cut short, replaced by the terrifying, echoing sound of a heavy wooden door slamming shut on a woman fighting for her bare survival. James Brown. Mode E, the paradox of peaks. At the absolute summit of his legendary career, the godfather of soul stood beneath the dazzling stage lights as a global powerhouse, an immortal icon whose revolutionary funk rhythms redefined the fabric of American music. He basked in the golden illusion of universal reverence, yet this peak of creative triumph stood in devastating contrast to the dark, chaotic underworld of his private life. On a volatile night in September 1988, the forgiving spotlight vanished completely inside his Augusta, Georgia home. Driven by a drug-fueled paranoia, Brown shattered his picture-perfect public persona, unleashing a relentless wave of raw agony against his third wife, Adrienne, beating her brutally and threatening her life with a firearm. The sudden drop from a cultural savior to a dangerous fugitive materialized on September 24, 1988, when he stormed into a nearby insurance office brandishing a shotgun, falsely accusing strangers of using his private restroom. What followed was a terrifying, high-speed interstate police chase across state lines that only ended when officers shot out the tires of his truck. The systemic blade of the law dismantled his empire, handing down a 6-year prison sentence for aggravated assault and weapon possession. Though he served over 2 years before his release, the illusion was permanently shattered, leaving an unfillable void where a music king once reigned before his death in 2006. The booming, triumphant horn section of a sold-out stadium anthem is violently drowned out by the screeching tires and frantic sirens of a police cruiser boxing in a fallen icon on a desolate highway. Miles Davis. Mode F, the inanimate observer. If the brass bell of a custom-crafted Martin trumpet could vocalize its memories, it would detail the dark decay hiding behind the most brilliant melodies in jazz history. To the global public, Miles Davis was a towering musical monument, an avant-garde powerhouse wrapped in the golden illusion of absolute artistic genius and effortless cool. But that elegant veneer functioned as a deceptive shield for an volatile double life defined by substance abuse and physical terror. During the sweltering summer of 1965, the walls of his New York home witnessed the absolute fracturing of his picture-perfect facade. Lost in a haze of heroin and alcohol, Davis's ego snapped over a minor disagreement regarding his clothing preferences, driving him to violently hurl his second wife, Frances Taylor, against a wall and strike her face until her eye was blackened in raw agony. The systemic blade of his addiction spared no one, but his uncontrollable rage eventually spilled out under the flashing lights of the public sphere. On August 25, 1959, outside the Birdland Club in Manhattan, a simple order from a police officer to move along escalated into a chaotic struggle when a drug-fueled Davis refused to comply. The ensuing brawl left the jazz icon bleeding profusely from his scalp after being struck with a heavy police nightstick, a public disgrace that required 5 stitches and resulted in an assault arrest. Though his musical career continued to thrive after his subsequent acquittal, the forgiving spotlight could never fully wash away the violent stains documented in his own 1989 autobiography, leaving a deep, unfillable void behind his legendary albums before his death in 1991. The smooth, melancholic wail of a solo jazz trumpet suddenly warps into a sharp, painful screech, drowned out by the heavy thump of a body striking a plaster wall in the dead of night. Rick James. Mode G, the psychological ghost. Inside the chaotic, adrenaline-fueled mind of Rick James, a monstrous silent predator was nurtured by the very industry that celebrated his wildest excesses. On stage, he was the untamed king of funk, a multi-platinum powerhouse wrapped in the dazzling stage lights of a revolutionary musical career. But that hypersexualized persona was a psychological ghost that completely consumed his reality, transforming his life into a toxic double life where real-world cruelty was treated as just another rock star privilege. The forgiving spotlight had convinced him that standard morality didn't apply to an icon, a dangerous delusion that took an earth-shattering turn in November 1991. Deep in a multi-day crack cocaine binge, James and his future wife, Tanya Hijazi, shattered the illusion of harmless hedonism inside his Hollywood home. They targeted a 24-year-old music executive named Mary Sager, trapping her for 20 agonizing hours while binding, beating, and subjecting her to a terrifying sexual assault. While out on bail, his internal decay only accelerated. In 1992, an even darker thrashed-out episode manifested when they kidnapped a second woman, holding her hostage for 6 days and burning her skin with a hot crack pipe to assert absolute control. The systemic blade of a criminal trial finally crushed his empire in 1993, delivering a 2-year sentence in Folsom Prison that exposed an unfillable void of human empathy. Though he attempted to rebuild his image, the sudden drop was total. His record deals vanished, leaving him to die quietly from heart failure in 2004 as a tragic monument to unchecked addiction. The high-energy, infectious bass groove of Super Freak abruptly distorts and stops, instantly replaced by the clinical, echoing click of a prison guard's handcuffs securing a broken star in the dark. Don King. Mode H, the statistical descent. If you want to measure the ruthless trajectory of a boxing powerhouse, you must look past the golden illusion and analyze the cold, calculating numbers that define his dark rise to absolute dominance. Don King built a multi-million-dollar sports empire, but his foundation was forged in the raw agony of street-level executions. The first numerical marker of his double life occurred in 1954, when a 23-year-old King shot and killed a man named Hillary Brown during a gambling dispute. While he escaped conviction by claiming self-defense, his violent instincts escalated exactly 13 years later. On a Cleveland street in 1967, King unleashed a merciless attack over a minor $100 gambling debt, repeatedly kicking and stomping the head of his employee, Sam Garrett, in broad daylight. Garrett succumbed to his injuries, resulting in a first-degree murder charge that King's high-priced legal team managed to reduce to second-degree murder. He served exactly 3 years and 11 months in prison before securing a clean slate through an executive pardon. The sudden drop from a convicted killer to a boxing legend was total. Upon his release, he managed historical multi-million-dollar fights like the Rumble in the Jungle, manipulating icons like Muhammad Ali out of an estimated $1.1 million in a single contract dispute. Though multiple fighters later launched a combined $30 million in lawsuits for systemic fraud, King utilized complex legal clauses to shield his wealth, leaving an unfillable void where accountability belonged while sitting comfortably atop a sporting empire built on blood. The booming, synchronized cheers of a sold-out heavyweight championship stadium instantly dissolve, replaced by the heavy, sickening rhythm of leather boots fracturing a man's skull on a concrete sidewalk. Sean Combs, Diddy, Modi, the ripple of one choice. In the dark calculus of power, a single decision to let a security camera run inside a luxury hotel hallway in 2016 became the merciless foe that would ultimately tear down a billion-dollar hip-hop empire. To the world, Sean Diddy Combs was an untouchable mogul, a cultural powerhouse wrapped in the golden illusion of bad boy records and glamorous, star-studded parties. But that picture-perfect public persona was an elaborate camouflage for a terrifying double life targeted at the systematic exploitation of young women. The sudden drop materialized in early 2024 when a horrifying surveillance video was leaked, showing Combs brutally beating and dragging his ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura through a hallway. This single, undeniable piece of evidence acted as a catalyst, shattering his forgiving spotlight and unleashing a torrential downpour of federal investigations. As the systemic blade of the law closed in, an earth-shattering secret was fully exposed. His legendary industry gatherings were merely a deceptive lure for orchestrated sex parties known as freak-offs. Federal prosecutors dismantled a decades-long network where victims were drugged, manipulated, and trapped under invisible walls of intimidation to satisfy his predatory desires. His multi-million-dollar endorsement deals and corporate strategies crumbled instantly, leaving him facing a potential 20-year sentence and exposing an unfillable void where a music king once stood. The champagne glasses from a multi-million-dollar penthouse celebration are shattered on the floor, their glittering shards reflecting the harsh, blinking red light of a federal recording device sealing an empire's doom. Bill Cosby, Mo J, the social media illusion. To millions of television viewers across the globe, William Henry Cosby Jr. was the absolute embodiment of the picture-perfect family man, a beloved cultural icon affectionately dubbed America's Dad. He stood beneath a beautifully crafted, forgiving spotlight as a beacon of morality and wholesome entertainment. But behind that protective Hollywood shield lay a dark, predatory empire that spanned more than 4 decades. The golden illusion of his clean-cut, grandfatherly persona functioned as a flawless, deceptive lure to systematically trap over 60 unsuspecting women. The sudden drop into absolute public disgrace arrived in September 2018 inside a Pennsylvania courtroom, when the systemic blade of justice finally shattered his legendary armor. Driven by a calculated malice, Cosby had operated a sophisticated, secret double life dating back to the 1960s, using his immense industry power to invite young, aspiring actresses and employees to private meetings. Once they were isolated, he would intentionally spike their drinks with powerful sedatives or alcohol, rendering them completely defenseless before subjecting them to the raw agony of sexual assault. Though a series of brave testimonies, led by a defining lawsuit from Andrea Const and regarding a 2004 assault, ultimately resulted in a historic criminal conviction and a 3 to 10-year prison sentence, a procedural error led to his controversial release in 2021. Today, His reputation is permanently buried under an unfillable void of public horror, leaving an aging figure to live out his final years in complete isolation. The cheerful, familiar theme song of a classic family sitcom is suddenly warped into an uncomfortable, low-frequency distortion, matching the heavy drop of a judge's gavel that forever unmasks a national hero. Wesley Snipes. Mode the Forensic. Look closely at a series of pristine, corporate ink signatures drying on the bottom of a stack of complex legal documents from 1999. Specifically, the official registration papers for a network of shadowy offshore bank accounts and dummy shell companies. Those seemingly technical business records became the definitive forensic paper trail that shattered the golden illusion of an elite Hollywood action star. To the global public, Wesley Snipes was an absolute box office powerhouse, a martial arts icon who commanded millions while basking in the dazzling stage lights of the blockbuster Blade trilogy. But that invincible cinematic armor functioned as a perfect camouflage for an volatile double life defined by a calculated financial war against the federal government. Driven by a bizarre anti-tax ideology championed by radical conspiracy theorists, Snipes made a conscious decision to completely ignore his civic obligations, intentionally failing to file any federal tax returns between 1999 and 2001. The systemic blade of the IRS eventually closed in, unmasking an earth-shattering secret. The actor had illegally concealed over $7 million in movie earnings from the authorities. The sudden drop from an elite Hollywood VIP to a federal criminal materialized on April 16, 2008, when a judge stripped away his forgiving spotlight and sentenced him to 3 years in a federal prison camp. Though his legal team launched numerous appeals to delay his fate, he was forced to serve his full sentence before his release. Today, his subsequent minor film roles have failed to restore his former glory, leaving his legacy fractured by a self-inflicted financial ruin that exposed a deep, unfillable void behind his action hero facade. The high-octane, theatrical sword-slashing sound effects of a Hollywood action blockbuster are instantly cut short, replaced by the mundane, chilling whir of an IRS forensic printer processing a federal indictment notice. Suge Knight. Mode B, the reverse tragedy. A crushing 28-year prison sentence delivered in October 2018, a shattered multi-million-dollar music catalog, and the cold reality of a maximum security cell saw an absolute titan of hip-hop standing in total ruin. Yet, if you rewind the tape of destiny to the mid-1990s, you are thrust back into an era where Marion Suge Knight operated as the most terrifyingly powerful mogul in the music industry, a rap powerhouse wrapped in the golden illusion of Death Row Records. He basked in a brutal, uncompromising, forgiving spotlight, managing immortal icons like Tupac Shakur and Snoop Dogg, while projecting a picture-perfect image of street royalty. But that empire was a highly calculated shield for an volatile double life defined by unbridled violence, extortion, and systemic intimidation. The final, absolute sudden drop materialized on the afternoon of January 29, 2015, inside a desolate parking lot in Compton, California. Driven by a furious ego over a minor financial royalty dispute regarding the biographical film Straight Outta Compton, Knight drove his heavy Ford F-150 truck directly onto a movie set to demand his cash. When a physical altercation erupted with an associate named Celie Bone Sloan, Knight completely snapped. He shifted his vehicle into drive, violently weaponizing the truck to ram over Sloan before ruthlessly crushing a local businessman, Terry Carter, beneath his massive tires. Carter succumbed to his horrific injuries on the asphalt, instantly turning a Hollywood business meeting into a public execution. While Knight desperately tried to claim the slaughter was a panicked accident, the systemic blade of his extensive criminal history, including a dark past filled with nightclub assaults and unproven links to infamous rap assassinations, crushed his defense, leaving an unfillable void where a music dynasty once stood. The booming, aggressive bassline of a multi-platinum West Coast rap anthem is violently cut short, replaced by the sickening, heavy crunch of a 2-ton pickup truck tire-crushing human bone on the Compton pavement. DMX. Mode C, the immersive witness. I remember standing in the center of a roaring, sold-out arena, watching a legendary rap icon unleash an explosive, raw energy that held tens of thousands of fans in absolute awe. He was a hip-hop powerhouse, a cultural phenomenon basking in a forgiving spotlight that made him look like a god of hardcore rap. But if you stepped past the golden illusion and entered the grounds of his Cave Creek, Arizona home in August 2007, that picture-perfect rock star aura vanished into a scene of absolute horror. I can still envision the sickening reality uncovered by law enforcement during a sudden raid. An volatile double life defined by a shocking undercurrent of cruelty. Officers discovered 12 starving pit bulls locked away in deplorable conditions, alongside the shallow graves of 3 dead dogs buried in the yard, exposing a brutal indifference that subjected innocent animals to a quiet, raw agony. DMX's reality had long been submerged in a chaotic haze of substance addiction, but this scandal shattered the public's perception of his rebellious charm. The sudden drop accelerated in 2017 when the systemic blade of the IRS caught up with his finances, unmasking an earth-shattering secret. The rapper had systematically cheated the government out of $1.7 million in music and acting income by operating strictly in cash. This calculated tax evasion resulted in a 1-year federal prison sentence in 2018. Though he continued to perform, his artistic legacy was permanently fractured, leaving behind a tragic, unfillable void when a drug overdose cut his life short in 2021. The aggressive, booming canine barks that served as a signature introduction to his multi-platinum hits suddenly dissolve, replaced by the hollow, mournful whimper of an abandoned animal inside a dark, neglected yard. Bobby Brown. Mode D, the systemic critique. Look beneath the hyper-profitable machinery of the 1990s urban music industry, and you will see how the forgiving spotlight of commercial success was used to mask a devastating cycle of domestic violence. Bobby Brown was celebrated as an R&B powerhouse, a multi-platinum pioneer wrapped in the golden illusion of a legendary, glamorous marriage to pop royalty Whitney Houston. But that picture-perfect family image presented to the public was merely an elaborate camouflage for a toxic romance defined by substance addiction and physical terror. The systemic blade of an industry that prioritized hit records over human safety allowed Brown to navigate a dark double life with near-total impunity for years. The absolute illusion shattered in December 2003 inside their Atlanta, Georgia home, when a volatile argument escalated into an explosion of raw agony. Brown brutally assaulted Houston, leaving her with visible facial bruises and a split lip before police intervened to arrest him. This was not an isolated incident. Records uncovered a historical pattern of abuse, including a 1993 episode where he publicly slapped her during a heated dispute. The sudden drop from an elite R&B icon to a chronic tabloid fixture accelerated throughout the 1990s and 2000s as he faced repeated arrests for drunk driving and drug possession. While the industry continued to profit from his past catalog, his unchecked anger and relentless relapses systematically dismantled his career, leaving behind an unfillable void where a legendary performer once stood. The smooth, rhythmic vocal harmonies of a classic new edition R&B ballad are abruptly cut short, drowned out by the chilling, frantic audio of a real-world 911 domestic distress call echoing through an empty mansion. Vanti Sweet. Modi, the paradox of peaks. At the absolute dawn of the 1990s, Vanti Sweet stood at the peak of a promising cinematic career, a rising Hollywood powerhouse celebrated for his magnetic, authentic performances in cultural monuments like Boys and the Hood and Menace to Society. He basked in the forgiving spotlight of critical acclaim, yet this sudden burst of artistic triumph stood in a devastating, tragic contrast to the harsh financial underworld creeping up behind him. By 1994, as his acting roles began to rapidly fade, the golden illusion of Hollywood success evaporated completely, replacing his glamorous lifestyle with a crushing reality of mounting debt and desperate economic hardship. The absolute sudden drop from an elite movie star to a desperate criminal materialized in early 1995, when Sweet shattered his public persona by orchestrating a wild, armed bank robbery in the heart of Los Angeles. Driven by financial panic, he and a group of accomplices entered the financial institution, brandishing a real firearm to threaten terrified bank employees before escaping into the night with a massive haul of stolen cash. The systemic blade of a forensic police investigation quickly dismantled his flight, using surveillance camera footage and local witness statements to track down the actor within a matter of months. The court handed down a harsh 7-year prison sentence that permanently destroyed his acting career and pulled him under an invisible wall of public disgrace. Following his release in 2002, Sweet completely vanished into total obscurity, leaving behind an unfillable void where a brilliant Hollywood star once shined. The cinematic, high-fidelity audio of a Hollywood movie premiere is instantly silenced, replaced by the clinical, low-resolution whir of a bank security monitor, capturing a fallen actor pointing a gun at a cashier. See Murder. Mode F, the inanimate observer. If the steel cylinder of a concealed semi-automatic handgun could recount its history, it would detail a chilling execution that took place under the neon haze of a packed dance floor. To the hip-hop community of January 2002, Corey C. Murder Miller was a towering rap powerhouse, an industry icon and brother to Master P, wrapped in the golden illusion of a multi-platinum music dynasty. But that celebrated musical royalty functioned as a deceptive camouflage for an volatile double life where street brutality could be unleashed in a fraction of a second. On the night of January 17, 2002, inside the Platinum Club in Harvey, Louisiana, the walls of the VIP section witnessed the absolute fracturing of his forgiving spotlight. When Steve Thomas, a naive 16-year-old fan, attempted to push his way toward the stage to catch a closer glimpse of his idol, Miller completely snapped. Driven by a furious ego, he pulled a handgun from his clothing and fired a single, cold-blooded round directly into the teenager's chest, subjecting the young boy to raw agony as he collapsed onto the blood-slicked dance floor. The sudden drop from a hip-hop god to a ruthless killer was total, while Miller desperately attempted to manipulate the systemic blade of justice by falsely claiming self-defense. A second-degree murder trial shattered his defense armor. The court delivered a devastating life sentence in 2003, locking him away inside Angola prison. Though his team launched numerous appeals over the decades, his public image remained permanently ruined, leaving behind a deep, unfillable void where a teenage fan's life was stolen for a moment of unchecked rage. The booming, high-energy bass line of a club anthem is violently cut short, instantly drowned out by the terrifying pop of a handgun and the panicked screams of a teenage crowd scattering into the dark. Coolio. Mode G, the psychological ghost. Deep within the fragmented mind of artist Leon Ivy Jr., long before he became a global rap icon, a dark, silent predator was taking root, fueled by a relentless addiction and the harsh desperation of poverty. To the world of the mid-1990s, Coolio was an international powerhouse wrapped in the golden illusion of a multi-platinum career, a charismatic superstar basking in the dazzling stage lights of his timeless anthem, Gangsta's Paradise. But that eccentric, high-energy persona was a psychological ghost that cloaked an volatile double life. The forgiving spotlight made him seem like a creative king, but if you look back to a dark afternoon in 1991, his hidden reality took an earth-shattering turn. Struggling to launch his music career and entirely consumed by a severe drug dependency, Coolio shattered his own future by walking into a Los Angeles convenience store with a loaded gun in his hand. He threatened terrified store employees, demanding cash before fleeing into the night, a reckless act of armed robbery that resulted in a 6-month jail sentence and 3 years of probation. The systemic blade of his addiction never truly left him. Even at the peak of his global fame in 1998, the illusion shattered again during a routine traffic stop in Lawndale when police caught him with an illegal weapon and hidden drugs. This sudden drop left an unfillable void of unanswered questions and chilling speculation about his private chaos. Until his sudden death in 2022 from an accidental overdose, his musical legacy remained permanently haunted by the dark, addictive cycles that ran beneath his fame. The smooth, iconic violin hook of Gangsta's Paradise suddenly warps and distorts, replaced by the heavy, metallic echo of a convenience store cash register being aggressively forced open at gunpoint. The curtain has fallen on these 17 legacies, and the golden illusion lies entirely shattered on the floor. We have looked past the dazzling stage lights and the multi-platinum accolades to witness a dark, unsettling underworld of choices that cannot be undone. Does learning the dark truths behind these icons completely change how you listen to their music or watch their films? Drop your raw thoughts and theories in the comments below. If you want to keep peeling back the forgiving spotlight to expose the real, unmasked history of Hollywood's elite, make sure to smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications. The stories we unravel today are truly just the tip of the iceberg.